far do you want to ask your question? And just introduce yourself and tell us where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm a physician, board certified internal medicine, practiced for 20 years, and then was in pharmaceuticals for 15 years. So my questions are, first, what phase or types of studies have been best for this kind of model? And then second, what kinds of sponsors have you been considering and feel might be the expansion for the future? You know, besides biotech and pharma, what about professional societies, patient advocacy groups who are getting more proactive in leading research, government agencies like NIH and so forth?
Great questions. So stage-wise, we began with phase 3s and phase 4s, kind of stuck to what we thought was safe and appropriate. And what we've learned as we've gone along and we've gotten better at picking out which kinds of medical practices do best with us, we've moved into phase 2. We've even done some 1Bs. So are there studies that are only ever going to be appropriate for a university setting or a tertiary care cancer center? Of course there are. And actually, we're partners with both Roswell Park Cancer Institute and University of Buffalo, which is New York State's flagship for its program. So there, in those roles, we don't play the same role we do everywhere else. They don't need a turnkey solution. They need infrastructure support. They might need some recruitment support, those kinds of things. But we love the mission, so we're happy to do it. But inside Circuit's core business model, think of it as really some 1Bs, but really 2 to 4 are really good spaces for us. We've done 75 clinical trials and clinical programs over the last 6 years, in 8 therapeutic areas. We just added oncology, partnering with Roswell Park to really build something very special up here. So it's really been a question of, and again, this goes back to Arlen's questions about, how should entrepreneurs work? And I think maybe the best book when you're thinking, should I even consider entrepreneurship? The simplest, shortest book to read is Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. And it's a great, simple primer on, if you think your idea is different, that is actually a feature, not a bug, right? Like, it's good to be a little contrarian, right? And so, I think in that book, he talks about, you start in a niche that you can go very deep in, obviously, unsurprisingly for some of us on the call, for our first trials were hypertension, heart failure, things I knew well, and I kind of knew what those trials look and feel like. We felt we could deploy them into single specialty groups. And then from there, we were like, so what parts of this are the same in GI? What parts of this are the same in diabetes? And then, if you hired really smart people who are really kind of clever, like we have a personality trait that we hire for. That trait, that personality profile, tends to come in every shape, size, color, ethnicity, orientation, but we have a very particular personality we're looking for with our team, both on the clinical and on the developer side. And if you get that, you can move the same person from a diabetes trial to a heart failure trial. They can assist on the GI trials. That's kind of the special stuff. So that's been the experience so far.
Great, thank you.
Did
you have another?
Yeah, I do. I have a quick follow-on question. Since you're engaged at bringing together patients and researchers, as well as sponsors, how do you view the patient? And you've talked about this as a therapeutic option. So that's clearly really important for oncology or other diseases where there's no other options, and that the trial may offer an option. But how do you address the potential concern of, how do you find the trial that's the best value for the patient versus from the sponsor's side, well, they just meet our inclusion criteria. So maybe we don't want a phase 1 trial. Maybe we want, where it has the best chance of improving the patient's disease, potentially curing, et cetera.
Yeah, the way we've done this philosophically is where we want to be is we want to not be recommending actions to physicians. So what we want to be doing is presenting options to physicians. They'll know best what's right for their practices, right? If they put their hands up to be investigators, we certainly put a lot of time and money into having the right resources inside the company to be able to translate a 70-page protocol document into a 3-page synopsis for our physicians, giving them our best guess at, hey, here's how we think the schedule of events works. Here's the nature of the patient. Here's the nature of the challenge in front of us for this, and here's what's in it for your patients, our patients, as we kind of take this thing out there for discussion. The other part of this, I think, is that that it's most patients aren't going to qualify for a clinical trial. You are still looking for if it's not quite a needle in a haystack, you are looking for the few among the many. So you have to have good messaging around what you're telling people, even at that first meeting, because really right now, when a patient screening fails, that's the end of their research journey, right? So you have to prep both the physician and the patient for this experience that you might qualify. It's probably worth a conversation if you'd be interested in this therapeutic, but I should be candid that you probably statistically may not qualify. And this visit is to figure that part out. And so what we've built as technologies of trial journey is to be able to keep that patient in a community for ongoing engagement for trials that they may qualify for. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the doctor believing in the trial and wanting to do that trial. That's the balance I think that we strike between being an agent of pharma per se, rather than being a facilitator of research broadly. One of the advantages we have is that because we have LabCorp Drug Development, which used to be Covance, but they've rebranded it. They do 600 clinical trials, and we're their preferential partner. So we have the luxury, plus we have our own sales team that's out to pharma looking for great opportunities to bring to our doctors for discussion. So we have the luxury of not needing to push a single trial at the expense of what's best for the patient, obviously, first and foremost, but also what's best for the physician, and then what's best for the health system. Our role is to create really great alignment, which means that some studies will be right for some physicians and health systems, some won't. And we have the luxury, because we've lived long enough and scaled up enough, that we can bring enough opportunities that there's something for everybody.
Great,
It sounds like there's an opportunity to make these trials more personalized and precise through analytics and artificial intelligence, if I can create the headline out of this discussion. Fernando, you had a question.
Hi. Yes, Orlando, thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I don't know if
tell us a little bit about yourself and then ask your question.
I was about to do that. I'm probably the only non-physician in the room, so I'm really happy to be, with that much wisdom around me, and I really mean that. I spent about 12 years in big pharma, commercial side, and just to tell you guys, I don't know what my career would have been if I hadn't had those very smart doctors around me. So, anyways, when you were talking, Irfan, about the problem that you have in terms of patient compliance and engagement in the clinical trials, I mean, that 20% percentage really surprised me. I really thought it would be a lot lower than that. And the reason I'm asking is, after being in big pharma, when I jumped into the startup space and started my own company, which is very, very young now, the problem that we're trying to tackle is exactly patient compliance and adherence. And because I lived that, and it's a huge problem. So the question is, because trying to engage patients and trying to keep them within the treatment in the day-to-day life of them, it's a very difficult task. So my question is, do you have any tools within your solution and in order to help patients be engaged into that? Is there anything that you're using for that?
So we built trial journey on the idea of what does the patient experience look like? What does that journey look like for that participant, right? So first, they have an extremely hard time even finding out if there is a trial. Lilly did this great study where they bleak study, but it was really useful data to show that out of the oncology clinical trials that are live, 90% of the people who would qualify for that study are unaware it exists. So the delta here between awareness and selection is massive. So if we wanted to accelerate drug discovery, if only we could get these messages to patients faster and better, right? So we've built a website that's designed to be kind of a destination site. If you're on the web, people like these, right? Like TripAdvisor shouldn't exist. Google can do all that for you. But people like being able to go to what's called domain-specific search or intent-oriented search. So we like TripAdvisor for our travel. We like OpenTable to book our stuff, even though, again, Google can do a lot of this stuff. OpenTable is just a very easy way to think about where do I go for this particular solution. There's nothing like that for clinical trial participants. So we built that with Trial Journey, having a lot of advantages, having the founders of health grades inside the company. We think those are going to be relatively similar, but they have distinctions. So one key idea is, what is engagement? And so what you see in pharma a lot of is surveying. So they'll take data from a patient. It's a one-way street, right? They'll pull data from the patient, like, hey, did you like this or that? This, and they'll put together a set of insights that the tech vendor will then bring back to pharma and say, hey, we've got some insights for you. None of that's happening in real time. It's all very kind of collected and enterprise sales oriented, right? The other thing you'll see a lot of is email push-outs from the trial to the patient, right? So again, another one-way direction. They've got terrible open rates. They've got very poor engagement rates, right? So here's some information, deal with it. The site ends up being, to this day, this indispensable part of really building that deeper connection. It's a relationship people have, interestingly, not with their investigator. If you look at who a patient thinks of as providing their care, it isn't the health system, it's definitely the doctor. But in research, it isn't the principal investigator who they see less, it's the coordinators and the experience they're having in the office. So that was what we think is the unique insight behind trial journey, is that how do you take some of that and keep it going? So everywhere else in the digital space, it's two-way transparency, right? It's the ability to leave an experience, leave a rating and review, and have that visible somewhere on the web for other people to see that you gave your impact. That's what we've built. It's curated, it's moderated. People can't unblind themselves or talk about side effects, but they can talk about things like, well, they kept me waiting 35 minutes, or, hey, he really explained it well, or she did an amazing job seeing me yesterday. Those kinds of things. And we're already showing in the work, we've been doing this now for about a year or so, and so we can show inside our own network it impacts compliance in exactly the same way it does at Healthgrades. So at Healthgrades, what they learned was that if you are mad at your doctor and you rate them on Healthgrades, not only are you not likely to leave your health system, your insurance is a big part of that inertia, but you're not even likely to leave your doctor. If you're able to have your say, people come back. They don't even change doctors, which is actually relatively easy to do inside a health system or a group. And so the idea behind that insight is that it's this ability to have a level playing field that people like, especially when the health system and the physician engages that comment and stuff. So we took that same idea to, well, let's have the sites have the same transparency, and we can show the same things, that people who rate are less likely to miss visits. So, compliance is obviously much broader. And the side that you're working on, the commercial side, do people take their medicines? How does that work? The stuff that PillPack has tried to look at, those are all really very severe problems. For us, we think and by the way, that retention number I threw out there, 1 in 5, there's lots of studies where the dropout rate is closer to 1 in 4, 1 in 3. So it's really interesting. If you're in a mission critical cancer trial, you're probably not leaving because it's an option that you don't have a lot of other options to. But there are plenty of patients in longer term studies that are just like, I kind of forgot why I'm doing this. In fact, one of the early stories we heard when we were doing feedback sessions and discovery was, I had a very successful lawyer in upstate New York almost choke up when we talked about our work. And he said that he had prostate cancer. That was scary enough, got treated for it. And in the middle of that, went into a clinical trial. And he said, the most dehumanizing and scary thing about having prostate cancer was being in that clinical trial. And 4 years afterwards, all he got was a postcard in the mail that said, stop taking your study medication, the study is over. Not even a thank you for participating. Not even a here's what we're going to do with the data, any of the rest of the stuff. So these are great questions. I think we've taken one important step to level the playing field, which will be good for everybody. Sponsors were a little scared of it first. We showed them this is actually a good thing for you, because people who rate and review, tend to rate when they have positive experiences. And secondly, they tend to come back, which is the most important part.